Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Sioux Falls City Council Minnehaha County Commission joint meeting. Today is Monday, November 21st. To begin the meeting, we'll just identify the leaders of the county and the leaders of the city who are representing all of you. Let's start with the Sioux Falls City Council.
Council members Aguilar.
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Intiman.
Here.
Erpenbach.
Here.
Jameson.
Here.
Karski.
Here.
Rolfing.
Here.
And now we'll go to the Minnehaha County Commission.
We have counselors. Well, I've been here too long already. We have Commissioners Jeff Barth and Cindy Heiberger and myself present for a quorum.
Very good, thank you. What we'd like to do is start the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. If I could just have you all stand and we'll recite the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll move on to the regular agenda. We do need a motion to approve the agenda. Would anybody like to make that motion?
So moved, Aguilar.
Second, Anderson.
Councilor Aguilar has made a motion to approve today's regular agenda, seconded by Councilor Anderson Jr. Are there any changes or motions? Yes, Councilor Erpenbach.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to amend the main motion and the regular agenda by moving item 2 before item 1.
Is there a second? There's been a motion by Councilor Erpenbach to amend the main motion and regular agenda by moving item number 2 before item number 1. It was seconded by Councilor Intiman. Any discussion at all? Very good. If we could have a vote on that, please, starting with the council.
Council members Aguilar.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Intiman.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
That has passed 8-0.
We need a motion from the County Commission to approve the regular agenda.
I move approval of the agenda as amended by the City Council.
Second.
We have a motion that has been amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That has passed. Is there any other discussion? Do we have to vote on the main motion as amended? Okay, very good. We'll start with the City Council.
Council members Aguilar.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Intiman.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
That has passed 8-0.
Similar motion for the county, Jeff, here.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion that's been approved and amended by the County Commission. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. We'll now move to item number 2.
A resolution of the City of Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County approving the Red Rock Corridor Plan.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Justin Powers with the Minnehaha County Planning Department. What we're looking at here today is the Red Rock Corridor Plan and an overlay district for the Red Rock Corridor. So what we've done here over the past year is we worked on the Red Rock Corridor, which is a is from 6 Mile Road to the Iowa state border, and it's a half-mile buffer north and south of State Highway 42. So our main objective of this process was to make this a community-wide effort, include residents, business people, and other people that are interested in this corridor that use this corridor daily. What we looked at was to establish goals and objectives that make recommendations to address the future land use as well as the development standards that occur within this corridor. Just a few corridor facts. Like I said, it's a half-mile buffer on both the north and south sides of Highway 42 from 6 Mile Road to the Iowa-South Dakota border. It is partly located in the joint jurisdiction, and that is why we are looking at it here tonight. It encompasses 2 townships, Split Rock and Valley Springs Townships. It's a 6.8-mile stretch along State Highway 42. There's 372 parcels of land, 254 landowners, and encompasses over 4,800 acres. So the map shown on the screen shows the Red Rock Corridor. What we first did is we established a task force of residents, business people, and landowners from within the corridor to work on getting a community-wide effort. That was made up of 14 members of the public, Those task force members met monthly. Basically, staff would present them with cases of stuff that we wanted to address within the corridor, and then they would make recommendations back to staff, and that is how we came up with the plan. All those meetings were open to the public, so we did have some members of the public attend those monthly meetings. Another way that we kept the public involved is that we created a corridor website in which people were able to comment on the corridor plan as it went through the process, as well as ask any questions or address any issues that they may have with the corridor. We also were able to post up our public hearings and public meetings that we held out throughout the process of this plan. So the first thing that the task force was responsible for was looking at the corridor and establishing focus areas within the corridor. So on the screen, we have established 4 focus areas within the corridor. These focus areas were areas that where the task force and staff deemed future land use changes could occur in the future. The next thing that the task force was responsible for was coming up with some ideas of what to hold at the first public meeting. So on January 20th, we had a community workshop in which we invited all the residents that are located within the corridor. They were able to come to that meeting. What we did is we created some surveys that they were able to fill out to give us some input about the issues and the current conditions of the corridor. Also, what we did is we held group discussions. So there were some task force members assigned to each table, and basically they held small group discussions with each of those tables, basically reiterating the same questions. What are the issues? What should occur in each of these focus areas? And so the group discussions were more focused around those 4 focus areas that were established, and it kind of gave us more of a detailed idea of what people thought about those areas that we had established. So from that first public meeting that we held, we were able to create 3 growth scenarios from the public input. So on the screen is growth scenario 1. This one shows what some of what we heard from was people didn't want to see any change at all. So basically this growth scenario doesn't show much change. It does show a little bit, but not much. And so that was what we wanted to establish, was try to create a variety between these growth scenarios. So the second growth scenario shows a little bit more progressive approach. It does call out a few more changes within the corridor. And the third growth scenario here is actually our most progressive. So we did also hear a lot of comments from people in the public that wanted to see a lot of change on this corridor. So this one got a little bit more variety in there, and so we had 3 growth scenarios that kind of created a wide variety of growth potential in the corridor. So the next thing we did is we took these 3 growth scenarios and we had them on display at a public open house. At that open house, basically we had these posted up. People were able to walk through, give us any comments, suggestions. We also had surveys available that people could fill out, if they liked number 1 or if they liked number 3, or maybe a combination of the 2. So basically what we did is we used that information from that public open house to establish our future land use map for the corridor, which is presented on the screen. So after establishing the future land use map for the corridor, what we did is we took that information and we were able to start to draft the plan. So now I'm going to basically go through the sections of the plan for you. So the first section is the introduction. In this section, we basically had a little of a corridor history within the plan, the plan's purpose, and basically the purpose of the plan is to preserve the rural character of this corridor while also providing opportunities to enhance development while preserving that rural character. And so the next thing that was included in there was the study area boundaries, of course, and also the planning process that I briefly just described. The next section is the existing land use section. So in that section, what we did is we basically surveyed the parcels of land that are currently in the corridor and established what their land use currently is. And so that is what the map is portraying on the screen. the next page, or the next section of the existing land use is basically our zoning categories. So this kind of describes what the existing zoning categories are in the corridor, as well as what all zoning categories are that we have in Minnehaha County. And so there's, residential, commercial, and industrial. Those are on the screen, but there's also several others that are listed within the plan. So those are basically the first two sections that we discussed in the plan, just giving some background and some history on the corridor. The next section was the future land use section, which led from the future land use map that we drafted. So at the very beginning of the future land use section, we discussed each of these 4 focus areas that I had shown you earlier. It gives us a little bit more detailed and description of each of these focus areas, and that's what we learned from basically those public meetings that we held at the beginning. The next map, of course, is the future land use map. And what we did is we basically looked at those focus areas, we looked at this future land use map that we have drafted, and what we established were the corridor goals. And so those are the 6 goals that are listed on your screen. So these corridor goals are basically the 6 goals that are for the entire corridor. Just to briefly look at them: continue intergovernmental coordination, prioritize the protection of agricultural and natural resource activities within the corridor. Mining extraction is very important in this corridor. It has been for a while, and it will be in the future. So we wanted to call that out to make sure that people are aware that this corridor does promote the natural aggregate that is in this corridor. We wanted to preserve the cultural and historic sites, to establish gateways to provide identifiable entrances to this corridor, so that people in this corridor can establish identity with the corridor. Also encourage the adoption of enhanced design standards, which are included within this plan, as well as transition between land uses. So those are the 6 overall goals that we have for the corridor. Then we establish land use policies and action steps. So for each land use, agricultural, residential, commercial, industrial, mixed use, we've established action steps or policies and action steps for each of these uses. And I don't have any of those listed, but those were listed within the plan. And so if there's any question about any of those, I can definitely look into those. The 4th and final section that we wanted to address with this corridor plan is the development standards and what to encourage and how to try to enhance the development as it occurs within this corridor. So what we've done, and this is kind of leading into the next item that you'll be looking at after this plan, is the Red Rock Corridor Overlay District. And so basically the purpose that we wanted to establish with these development standards in this overlay district is to maximize the corridor's potential development by ensuring compatibility between the future and existing land uses that are currently within the corridor. So what's on the screen is basically the things that we tried to address within the plan and this overlay district. So we set requirements for a site plan review. The county currently does not have a site plan review process for any permitted uses. If you come in for a conditional use, you're required to go through that process, which a site plan review is included. This is calling out a site plan review for any permitted uses that are allowed within the corridor. We've also looked at exterior building, signs, buffer requirements, fencing, lighting, and parking, all within the development standards of this plan. I'm going to call out a couple of these. Some of the most important ones that we talked about through the public meetings and through all of our public input was the first one was signs. This corridor doesn't have a lot of off-premise signs or billboard signs along it. I believe there's one billboard that's for the Arboretum in this corridor, and people don't like a lot of advertising along this corridor and didn't want to see more advertising with the development of the casino on the Iowa side, as well as people entering into Sioux Falls. There could be a lot of advertising along this corridor. So what people were okay with was on-premise signs. So if you do have the business there, they were okay with that kind of signage, but they did not like the pole signs. So what we have established here is you are allowed the on-premise signage just as is allowed in our current zoning ordinance. However, for any freestanding sign, it cannot be of a pole sign or anything of that nature. It has to be a ground or a monument sign, and that's what's shown on the screen. Basically, a monument sign is defined as the face of the sign cannot be more than 3 feet above the ground, and there should not be any airspace between the face sign and the ground. So that's basically the definition of a monument sign, and that is what they wanted to address with on-premise signage. Like I stated, that people did not want to see any billboards or any pole signs along this corridor, or any new pole signs or billboards. So what we've done is we've actually taken out off-premise signage within this corridor, except for if you're advertising a multi-tenant site. So if there's a commercial property that has 3 or more commercial uses on it, then they can advertise all of those on one site there instead of having a sign for each site. And so we've called out multi-tenant signs being available, as well as directional signs are still being available for off-premise. But any larger off-premise signs, such as billboards, are not going to be allowed within the corridor at this time. So the next thing that we discussed was trying to be able to buffer between the existing residential or future residential properties with the new commercial or industrial development that may occur within the corridor. So this is kind of just an example of what the scenario would be if a commercial property were to basically develop next to, or within sight of a residential development. Then they would be required the 30-foot buffer. So on the next slide, we would look at the next table, which states that on a 30-foot buffer, you're required 8 trees per 100 linear feet of property. So this is a way to create kind of a screening and a buffering between the residential properties and the future and new commercial and industrial developments. And just the next slide kind of gives you a little bit of a visual of what that may look like. You have the residential property basically next to a commercial property, so we're trying to keep that buffer or screening between those two properties. That's basically what I have, but before I conclude, I kind of want to recognize the 14 people that were members of the task force. We do have a few of them here tonight within the audience, and they did a tremendous job meeting with staff monthly and just giving us ideas and working with us to draft this plan. So it has been a multidisciplinary effort to try to get this plan to you tonight, and it's been a great success, I think, through this process. So those 14 people are listed on the board there, and I'm going to just briefly read through those real quick, just so that you can see the different variety of people that we did have. We had Jeff Schmidt from the City Planning, Patty Knorr from Merle and Roy's Paving, Bonnie Duffy from Split Rock Township, R.J. Wright, he's a resident and landowner, Don Johnson is the Valley Springs Township, Brooke White is in the audience, and she is from the South Dakota Department of Transportation. Lori Kiso is in the audience, and she's from the Mary Jo Wagner Arboretum. Sam Assam is a landowner. Kevin Gallo, he was a member of the CAC of the Sioux Falls MPO, and he is in the audience. Jason Klein is a landowner. Doug Odie was a resident landowner. Scott Anderson, Pat Herman, and Darren Vandenberg were county staff. And I believe Bonnie Duffy from Split Rock Township is also in the audience tonight. So I just wanted to recognize those people, because those people have been with us throughout this process and have done a tremendous job. So that is all I have for you here tonight. So if there's any questions about the plan or the overlay district, I can answer those at this time.
Dustin, thank you very much. Great presentation and good leadership there. Before we go on to questions, is there anyone in the audience who wanted to speak to the county commission or the city council about this particular topic? Very good. Then I will open it up to the council or to the county to talk about this. Any thoughts at all? Yes, Councilor Anderson, Jr.
I guess I've seen the presentation a little bit earlier this last week, actually. But after seeing that and then taking a look at this today, my question comes on Highway 42 and that interchange there at 26th Street, and how this plan will match up with the Split Rock 10th Street that comes out to the east there and interchanges there right there on 42 and 26. how is this plan going to match up with that 10th Street where Split Rock and all those businesses are at 6 Mile Road?
Okay, at 6
It would
Mile
be a
Road.
little west of what your Red Rock corridor is here.
Well, we don't address anything with, the development of the roadway, and that is within the MPO's long-range transportation plan. And within the plan, it does state that, the long-range transportation plan is, we are aware of that, and that basically it will be following, that plan. This is a state highway, and, that's more under the regulations of the MPO and the state of South Dakota. So we don't deal with anything transportation related. Basically, this plan is addressing land use and the development standards within this corridor.
Right, and so I guess what I'm asking is, how does this plan match up with the development that we're having just to the west of that interchange? Right on 42, 42 turns into 10th Street?
And that is why, basically, with the city's future land use, what they have planned for this area is basically it's outside of the city limits. So basically, that's why they label it as single family residential, basically out in that transition or growth area, basically. So that's why we've labeled it. The majority of the joint jurisdiction is zoned as, or not zoned, but as labeled as a future land use of residential. We did call out that triangle there that is blue there. We called it out as mixed use. And within this Shape Sioux Falls plan, you call out 26th Street and 6 Mile Road as a future neighborhood commercial area. And it was kind of hard for us to split that parcel up into a bunch of different land uses. So that's why we've labeled that blue there, or that area, as mixed use. So what you've called out in the Shape Sioux Falls plan is to basically have that area as a neighborhood commercial center, and then that which encompasses commercial things as well as single family residential. And so that's how we've kind of formulated this around that, because we did work see what the city's input was within the joint jurisdiction, and they do have future growth out there. So we've labeled that as single family, but we did call out that intersection as mixed use.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councilor?
I just wanted to add a comment that Kenny and I both serve on and Rex, I think. Who else serves on the UDC committee? Dean? Okay, so we did hear this presentation last week, very good. For the last year, they've been working on this, and it's just, I think, such a great benefit to have all this out front for us to rely on later when this growth comes, and it will come. And it's really, really good to have so many people involved in this process, and I would encourage approval by both bodies.
Councilor Jameson, did you want to make a motion to approve that?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Councilor Jameson's made a motion to approve this resolution, seconded by Councilor Anderson, Jr. That's on the city side. Is there any discussion at all? Any further discussion? Yes,
I just want to
Anderson.
make one more comment on Councilman Jameson's comment. I think this is a great example showing how intergovernmental entities work together with the citizens to plan our future.
Nice job. Could we have a roll call vote with the city council, please?
Council members Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Intiman?
Yes.
Erfenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Ralphie?
Yes.
That is passed 8-0.
We need a motion from the county commission to approve the resolution for the Red Rock Corridor Plan.
Move approval of the Red Rock Corridor Plan.
Is there a second?
There's a second.
Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Very good. Item number 1.
Second reading and ordinance amending the 2002 revised joint zoning ordinance for Minnehaha County and the City of Sioux Falls by approving the Red Rock Corridor Overlay District.
Dustin?
Good evening, Commissioners. Basically, this is what I've already presented to you, but this would establish the overlay district over this corridor, in which would make these development standards enforceable through our zoning ordinance. So if there's any further questions, I can answer those.
Dustin, thank you. This is a second reading, folks. Is there anyone in the audience who wanted to speak to this item? Very good. Council or County Commission, any thoughts?
Move approval, Rolfing.
Councilor-
Second, Entenmann.
Councilor Rolfing's made a motion to approve this ordinance, seconded by Councilor Entenmann. Is there any discussion amongst the City Council? Very good. A roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers Aguilar,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Entenmann.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jamison.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0.
Need a motion from the County Commission to approve the ordinance that was read by the city clerk.
Second,
To approve the overlay?
second, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Item number 3.
A resolution advising and giving consent to the appointment of members to the Homeless Advisory Board.
Good evening. I'm Stacy Teason. I'm the coordinator for the Homeless Advisory Board. The Homeless Advisory Board met at a regularly scheduled meeting on November 7th and discussed potential candidates for adding to the board, replacing Tam Baker's position, which expired in August. We had met with Matt Athelford a few months ago to see if he would be willing to be on the board, and because of his position, he had to get approval from the Senate Ethics Committee to make sure he wasn't in violation of anything. And he came back a few weeks ago and told us that he could indeed be on the board. So on the 7th, the Homeless Advisory Board agreed that Matt would be an excellent member to add to the Homeless Advisory Board, and following procedure then, it's a joint resolution between the city and the county to approve Matt to the board.
Stacey, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who wanted to speak to this item? Very good. City Council or County Commission, any questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve Erpenbach.
Second, Aguilar.
Councilor Brock's made a motion to approve item number 3, seconded by Councilor Aguilar. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers Aguilar,
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Entenmann.
Yes.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jamison.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0.
County Commission needs a motion to approve the resolution of the appointments of the members of the Homeless Advisory Board.
Chairman Benega, Mr. Mayor, being the county commissioner that serves on the Homeless Advisory Board, I've been in on those deliberations. I would make a motion to approve that appointment.
Thank you.
A second?
We have a motion and a second to approve. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stacey, and congratulations, Matt. Item number 4.
2011 Homeless Count Data in Sioux Falls.
Okay. What does Matt do? Sorry.
All right.
Cece, welcome.
This should be all in a PowerPoint for you in front of you, but I also made copies of it for you so you could take the information with you or write down notes. Just want to thank you in advance for giving me time to come before you and present this information. This is the first time that the Homeless Advisory Board has actually tabulated the data on a local level. We have in the past relied on the South Dakota Housing Development Authority in Peer to do the official statewide tabulation, but we thought that we would have a better chance of getting some hardcore data out that we could utilize in how we plan our future. So I just want to, there are a lot of questions on this. I went with the ones that I thought would be some of the bigger highlighted areas, and I ran that by several members of the board to make sure that we were touching on the key points. So we'll just start. The Homeless Advisory Board does a one-day count. The entire state does a one-day count, and it's usually in September, usually the last week of September. And for us this year, it was September 27th. We started at about 4 a.m. at Labor Ready, and we went all day until 10 p.m. that night, finishing up at the detox. And throughout the course of the day, I'd say we had over 40 people volunteering to help us with that, and countless agencies in the community that serve our poor and our homeless populations. The thing to keep in mind with this data is that it is a one-day count, so if people did not come to an agency or did not want to be counted, because this does usually get a lot of press, people stay away from those agencies because, unfortunately, being homeless is something that people take a lot of shame in being, and even though it's not necessarily something to be shameful of, people sometimes don't want to be identified as homeless, and so they'd rather not. So I would just ask that you look at this as this is one piece. These are the number pieces. These aren't the stories that go with it that we heard. Councilor Erpenbach was at Labor Ready with us at 4 a.m. that morning, and she heard some stories, and throughout the course of the day we heard some really impressive stories about people struggling, trying to make ends meet, and then unfortunately not being able to keep a roof over their head. So if you look at the, oops, you want to stay at the red chart? Thanks. So this is the last couple of years, starting with 2003. This year's numbers, and this is just the one survey, is 729. That number is unfortunately up from a year ago, which was 631. The statewide number that was released on Friday is 1,453. So our 729 figure into that overall pool. But just so you can kind of see that it's up, down with how things go with the homeless count. And again, keeping in mind that it's just a one-day count. In regards to the survey, it's tricky. It's tricky to try and figure out the best way to get people to do this because obviously it's a voluntary thing for people to do. No one is forced to have to do the survey. So to try and track the data as best as possible, we have 3 different methods that we do. And so the primary form, the one that all the data that you'll be seeing in front of you is from our primary homeless survey. And that is people who willingly sat down with us and completed a survey and shared their experiences. From that, we had 254 individuals complete that survey that day. We have a refusal survey, so people who would identify themselves as homeless but did not want to sit down and do a survey with us. And from that, we had 270 people. And then we have the doubled up survey, which is a number that gets tossed around a lot, but people don't really know what that looks like in Sioux Falls. I just heard a story at a presentation not too long ago about a family with 12 kids living in a 2-bedroom apartment. So we know that doubled up happens in this community, and of course what ends up happening in that situation is the entire family risks being evicted because the landlord's probably not too pleased with having that many people live in an apartment. But the doubled up survey is completely different. In that one we counted 80 people, and the thing with a doubled up is people are living together out of economic necessity, not because they want to. So of those 254 that we counted, 54% or 136 of them were men, and then the remaining 114 were female. And this is pretty typical, but our numbers have started to skew a little more towards the female population. We've seen an increase in the number of women being released from incarceration and not having a stable place to go to, and unfortunately there's not enough shelter beds in the community to meet the growing need for the women that are being discharged. So this is an increase in the female population, but overall a pretty typical 50-50 split. I didn't know which way to make this look prettier, so I did it both at the table and with the chart. This is race, and for Sioux Falls then our predominant population, 52.3%, were identified as white. The next largest category was our American Indian population at 84 individuals, or 34.9% of the population. This information does not include children or their partners, so this is just the 254 people who completed the survey. Our age categories vary a little bit. Nationally, if someone asks you what's the age of a homeless person in the United States, the answer is 7. That's a very scary number when we talk about homeless families and kids and how traumatic the experience is. In Sioux Falls, our primary population is between the ages of 41 and 50. But we also don't count age category for kids in this survey, so I wouldn't know for sure whether we have that as an average in Sioux Falls. We do only attract the adult numbers and not the spouse, the partner, wife, so just the people doing the survey. So, and the other thing that I'd like to mention on this one is our under 18 population. I know Councilor Anderson Jr. has talked about this before, but we do have a pretty significant unaccompanied youth population. They are very difficult to peg, and unfortunately some entities do not like to count them because that would mean we have a problem. We did manage to get 6 kids a youth to do our survey on that day. So either they are living in a transitional living program like the independent living program through VOA, or they're living on the streets. So just keeping in mind that we have kids in need, and Nicole Berger will be doing a presentation following me in regards to a youth needs assessment that the Homeless Advisory Board and Volunteers of America put together in May that will tackle some of these issues with our youth. This is a big question. Where do you plan on sleeping tonight? This is one of the first questions that we ask. And in this situation, we know that the biggest number is usually at an emergency shelter. Transitional housing is our next largest category, and for that, that's Heartland House. It's the apartment units that St. Francis House has. It's Carroll Institute's program. It's the Glory Houses program. So basically anyone that's living in a temporary situation that's being governed by an entity like a nonprofit that would qualify in this category as transitional housing. We do know that there was also 36 individuals who identified themselves as living outdoors this day. And keep in mind that that was a great day. September 27th was very nice, so I wasn't so very worried about those individuals being outside. But as the weather has shifted, to keep in mind that we have 36 individuals who could be outdoors still. And in regards to that, then we kind of look at what are our options for winter plans. And we've worked really hard this year to try and have a winter plan in place before it got too cold. This one works exactly statistically correct, so I'm kind of excited about that. We know that on average, a homeless family or a homeless individual stays homeless about 1 to 5 months. Usually it's a very temporary situation, a situation happened and they kind of hit a bump and ended up homeless. Maybe they were evicted, maybe they lost their job, any number of reasons. But we know that in this type of situation, they're pretty easy to get back on track. We also know that if we're looking at case management services or trying to get someone situated, this is the easiest population to work with because they've got the motivation still. They're not so full of hopelessness and despair. And so we know that we can tackle this one. The other thing to look at, though, is we do have a population over there that has been homeless for more than 10 years. Those are going to be some of your more challenging individuals and some of those that significantly choose probably to be outdoors, and it could be because of mental health issues or it could be for a variety of reasons. But we were at a meeting not too long ago, and Julie Becker from St. Francis House made a strong statement about case management services and providing the necessary support. And she basically said that up to 6 months, it takes 6 months for a family to get the relationships and the support that they need to be able to function and stay housed. And so if we were looking at pushing things forward, we would like to be able to provide case management services to families or individuals who are looking at trying to make their lives stable again. This one says, how many times have you been homeless in the last 3 years? And also greatly happy that this is statistically on track. We know that homeless families and individuals pretty much are homeless once. Something happened and got them off track. And so if they can meet with someone who takes them under their wing, if they can create a relationship with someone, the chances of them getting back on track quicker is absolutely what's going to happen. So we look at that and we say that that's pretty exciting. We have that population up there, though, that's been homeless 4 or more times. And so this is for 50 individuals that identified on this survey that they've been consistently homeless. This, to me, is the population that Safe Home is going to go forward and address. They currently are addressing it, but this is also that. These are your chronically homeless individuals who have a variety of substance abuse disorders or persistent mental illness, some sort of thing that is keeping them from being able to stay housed. And so if you look at Safe Home opening up at the end of December, that will tackle 33 individuals, and we'll move forward with reducing that number. The St. Francis House and Union Gospel Mission are 2 of our shelters in town, but they most often don't deal with this population very well. So the Salvation Army has once again stepped up and offered to be the warming site this winter. They'll open in January, about the 5th of January, and they'll stay open until mid-March. And they'll be open from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And we're really grateful for them for being willing to do this one more time. However, Major Mike has also said that this is the last time that they'd like to do this. They'd like to be able to use their gym next year. So the Homeless Advisory Board, along with other community leaders, are working to try and establish a concrete plan for next winter, the 2012-2013. Does anybody have any questions so far? I know that I can talk really fast, so I'm trying to slow it down. Okay. The next one is the primary event. And the thing with this is it's not going to add up to 100% because there's sometimes more than one event that led to someone becoming homeless. For us, though, what's statistically significant is the lost job unemployment category. It's been a pretty rough year for people. And when you're making $7.50 an hour, it doesn't take long for things to kind of spiral out of control. There's also an inability to pay rent comes up as a high category, and so kind of that could coincide or intertwine with your lost job, because if you don't have income coming in, you can't pay your rent. Alcohol and drug use, we've seen some increases in that, and some people who have been staying at St. Francis House and stuff who've had prior records because they were incarcerated for their DUIs. So just a little bit more instability going on, but overall, this is a general categories that when we ask these questions, that's what it includes. There's an other category in there if you look and you see that there's 44 people who gave different answers. And so I tried to just sum those up as best as possible, but variations of one way or another, that there's no income coming in, too much debt, credit problems, unaffordable housing, wages are too low. And when we talk about fair market rent, it's definitely something that's pretty difficult for people who are working minimum wage, especially at retail, leisure, or hospitality jobs in Sioux Falls, to be able to afford fair market rent for an apartment. A two-bedroom apartment is around $695 in the city of Sioux Falls. So for someone earning $7.25 an hour, they need an apartment that's about $350. So the skew there is pretty challenging, and when someone's paying more than 50% of what they're making towards their rent, unfortunately it doesn't take long for them to go from being precariously housed to being homeless. And so it's not because of a lack of effort, because they are working, it just becomes too difficult to maintain, and if the car breaks down or something happens and you need to take care of it, you're going to do that and forego the rent. And even though that might sound difficult or weird to someone who's used to paying their bills on time, when transportation is your key way of getting to where you need to go and getting your kids to events and getting your kids to school, you're going to take care of the car. This question, what is preventing you from having your own housing? We have the other category that looks bigger than the rest, but there's some people that didn't respond to that one. So 49 out of 125 didn't answer that question. So that takes away the skew. But 43.7% say that they are unable to secure housing because they lack full-time employment. This is the first time we've actually asked this question, so I have nothing to relate it back to, but I was really intrigued to see what this would be. And then criminal history plays a big role as well. And we know from programs that the city's had before, like the TEST program, the Tenant Education Self-Sufficiency program that the city's had, past rental issues have been a reason why people haven't been able to get housed. So you look at these and it still is pretty consistent that there are issues in regards to past rentals, damaging of property, and then also some past dues on rents and utilities. Evictions are a difficult thing to get past when agencies are doing credit reports. If you look in the other category as well, other than the 49 that didn't respond, lack of affordable housing, unable to find work due to a knee injury, mental health issues, domestic abuse issues, poor budgeting, and then chemical dependency were listed as reasons as well. This is also the first time we've asked this question because I really wanted to know the answer to this. And so, do we have highly skilled people who are homeless, or what are we talking about when we're talking about our homeless population in Sioux Falls? Well, again, on the other category, we have 61 out of 85 that did not answer this question, so that's why it's skewed that way. But I put it in pink so that it'd be observable. 24% actually have a 12th grade diploma. So that's pretty good. I put together 8th, 9th, and 10th grade and 11th grade into that first category so that it would be a little more condensed. But we do have some people who have got educations. We have people who have associate's degrees. So it's just a matter of all these pieces going together to determine just exactly what it is that we need to get our homeless population back on track. And if they're well educated, then obviously there's something else. But this shows that we do have some room to enhance some life skills and perhaps further their education to get them better paying jobs. This question addresses the how many people are in your household. So of the 254 people that we surveyed, 31 of them said that they had a wife, husband, partner with them. And then 174 children were also identified as being homeless on this survey. So 41 additional family people said that they had children. So total then, that's how we get to that 729 number, the 31, the 174, and then the 254. And I had an interesting story. I met with a pastor from a local church the other day who's recently moved downtown, and his first experience was with a family with 10 children and 2 adults, and they were homeless, and he didn't know where to go, so he was calling around trying to find an apartment or someplace for this family to rent. And unfortunately, what he found out was there's no place that's going to rent to this family. So he ended up taking them home. It's not a method I would recommend because you don't know what you're getting yourself into. It's very kind and magnanimous, so I applaud him for that effort, but it's also going to take a whole lot of community collaboration because this isn't going to be the only very large family that's going to be in need. What type of monthly income? I think this one is a very important piece, so I just want to harp on it a little bit. 45.7% of the people that we're working with that are homeless are working. They have jobs. 49% don't, but 45% of them. So we have people who are doing everything right. They're going to work, they're getting a paycheck, and they still can't afford to keep a roof over their head. I think that that is a testimony to our affordable housing issue. This one is in regards to the largest barriers that people are experiencing in regards to finding employment. If you look at that, transportation comes up. This has been the key one for as long as I can remember. We've been doing this. I've been doing this count, conducting it for the last 4 years, but I've been a part of it for the last 9 years, and transportation continues to be at the top of the list. So just looking at this, 42.3% have transportation as a need. Criminal record, this is the first time we put criminal record on this survey, so it's interesting to see that 20 people said that they cannot get employment because of their criminal record. So that will definitely add to their level of hardship in trying to find a place to live. And we also know that the economy and the availability of employment, especially jobs that pay more than $10 an hour, are a challenge for our families and individuals to get in touch with. We know on average that it costs about $12.50 to live in the city of Sioux Falls as a living wage. So you'd need to be earning that. $7.50, $8 an hour isn't going to cut it. You'd have to work 2 jobs. And for a family for a single mom who's trying to raise her kids, she's willing to do that, but she's also got the burden then of not being around where her kids are when they're out of school. And so then that kind of leads into other areas of juvenile delinquency and other possibilities that might stem from that then. So again, it becomes about finding affordable housing. And we also know that for some of those on the criminal record side, crime-free housing in this city, we have a lot of it. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It is a good thing. I'd like to know that my kids are safe and my family is safe because they're in a crime-free unit. But we also have to keep in mind there are plenty of people who have made bad choices and that have learned from those bad choices and deserve a second chance. And so we need to be able to find a way to make sure that they can get housed too. What supportive service programs do you need that you don't currently receive? This one doesn't add up to 100% because obviously people could choose more than one answer. The one that stands out, though, is housing placement. The question is a little vague. I'm not sure I even know exactly what that's supposed to mean, but I interpret it to mean that they need help finding a place and finding a landlord that's willing to work with them. So 51.5% of our homeless population needs help finding a place. And on top of that, then they have transportation issues. So they can't get where they need to go, or they can't go from apartment complex to put in applications or look at places because it's too difficult. And then the third highest one on this is the medical and dental care. We know that everything starts with your health. So if you are not in good health and you are on the streets or you are being forced to live outdoors or hop from place to place to place with no stability, especially in regards to kids, we know how traumatic homelessness is for children. They have higher rates of asthma, they have higher rates of illnesses. All the way around, homelessness is hard on kids. And when they're in multiple living situations, they are exposed to a lot more things than they would be if they were living in their own place. The last question from the survey is just, I thought was important because we wanted to make sure that we're addressing the veteran issue. I don't know that this actually got to all of the veterans that we would count in this community because only 23 people actually responded out of the 254 as being a veteran. We know statewide this number is statistically increased, but for us that seems pretty standard, so 23 people identified as being a homeless veteran. There are services available through the VA if they qualify for the Homeless Outreach Program, and there's also a new drop-in center that is opened through the Volunteers of America at 14th and Cliff, which is a daytime drop-in shelter for families, for homeless individuals and their families that are veterans. So it's a pretty big thing. It just opened up the 1st of November, so we'll see how well that goes in aiding the need in the community. So all of that information is a lot, and it's all statistics and data, and so I apologize for that part, but it's just important to see that we spend time doing this and that we understand that these numbers reflect what's really going on with our homeless population in this community. This data is fresh. I just finished it up 2 weeks ago. We did the survey on the 27th of September, so if you're looking at relevance, it's pretty statistically relevant to what's going on right now. So I just would like to conclude with how we are working towards finding permanent solutions as a board, and just put in a bit of a historical reference. In 1948, there was a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In Article 25, it is stated that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of an unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Safe, decent housing is the key to neighborhood stability and revitalization. If you follow that logic, you'll get to the belief that community stability, vitality, safety, and the rest is dependent upon having all citizens safely and decently housed. At least that's the theory behind all the 10-year plans and what we've been basing all of our work upon. So we look at where we've been. Community collaboration is really what we've focused on for the last year. We've got a lot of data. We know where our gaps are. We know where our unmet needs are. We've worked really hard to stabilize and have a winter plan in place. So we thank the majors, the Salvation Army, for opening up their winter warming sites in January. It still leaves December and November a little bit. So we're hoping that people will step up and take care of that. But we're definitely working on a plan to have something in place for next year that's more solid. The Housing Trust Fund, you'll hear more about in the near future. We have our national expert, Mary Brooks, and her marketing guru coming on the 30th to talk to us to look at ways to get dedicated revenue sources and also how to market our campaign. I'm very excited. I think this is the best way to increase our affordable housing stock in the city of Sioux Falls, and a pretty innovative one too. South Dakota is one of 4 states that doesn't have a housing trust fund, so I'd like to see this move forward, and we'll definitely be informing you about it in the near future. Transportation issues, we obviously have a bus system that doesn't run late enough and doesn't run on Sundays. Everyone's aware of it, that we know it comes down to money. So looking for ways that we can coordinate together, especially with the faith-based community in regards to maybe vans that they have, or other methods of transportation that we could coordinate better. We do have the Pass It On program that the city provides, 40,000 passes every year. I distribute those to 14 agencies that serve our homeless populations, and that works very well. Of course, I'd like to ask for more passes, but I'll take the 40,000 that we get and be happy. Consumer involvement is something that's new. We're working on that. There's an advisory board of sorts that's going together, and we'll hopefully have a first meeting in January involving people who have experienced homelessness and getting their viewpoints on services in the community. And then the last is just community awareness and education, making sure that we're dealing with the stereotypes and understanding truly what's going on in the community, and refraining from judgment and understanding that everybody has a story. I thank you for your time and welcome any questions.
Stacy, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say and call attention to one point that Stacy brought up, which is the warming centers. Having been involved in homeless issues and having been on the Homeless Advisory Board for a couple of years now, it seems like every year we just barely find a way to have a warming center. God bless them, the Salvation Army is going to open it up on the 5th of January, but it's pretty chilly out there tonight. Where do those people go? And, you know, it just bothers me a lot that every year we just barely get by and we don't have a permanent solution for where people can go to just get out of the elements when it's 25 degrees, 10 degrees, 25 below. We have to invent the wheel every year over and over, and I'd really like us to find a solution for that particular issue before we get to next October and have to scramble again to find a solution.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Jamieson.
Stacy, thank you, and now you get a little rest here. I know you have to cover a lot of stuff, and I don't know that I've been a real friend of the homeless community or involved in the discussion over the years, but just sitting here today, listening to your discussion, going through your graphs, from the council's perspective, public transportation is something that we are involved in, and if the bus routes are going past these temporary housing and the emergency shelters already, are they on the route system?
Most
They're
of
close.
them are.
Okay. And if the 40,000 tickets are not enough, I think we should probably help in that manner, and I would urge us to find some more than, I don't know, do you have a recommendation?
The program used to get 60,000 a few years ago, and then with some changes, Mr. Cooper was involved in that. With some changes, we agreed to a concession of passes, and we agreed to more regulations, but we also got to remove expiration dates, and we got to make the passes look like the regular bus passes, so we didn't have to deal with so much discrimination because they used to be homeless bus passes. Now they're just general status quo. They look like all the other passes, and so I just have to have the agencies report to me every month the number of passes that they're using, and it's been working really well. We've been doing it, I think, for 4 years almost now, and so it's just that we know, especially this time of year, like the county Human Services is one of the agencies that gets the bus passes. We ran out of our bus passes that are supposed to last till December last week. So if there was a way to increase them, that would be fantastic. They technically don't cost the city anything because they wouldn't be riding the bus either way, but the passes are valued at $1 a piece, so that's a $40,000 gift that we take into consideration and are incredibly grateful for, but also knowing that we could use more and get people to where they need to go better, especially with the loss of transfer passes last year. That took away, people used to get transfer passes, and now it takes 2 more passes to get where they're going.
Okay, so the higher number that you had essentially decreased through some verification that those tickets were probably being used appropriately by the right people.
Well, they had expiration dates on them, so if you got
Okay.
them and they only had 3 days to use them and something came up and you couldn't use them, then they were just no good. So we got to eliminate the expiration date, which has been fantastic because then they're good forever, but it still is not enough passes.
I would if I could, if you could share with us somehow directly exactly how many more you need to get through the year, I think the council, at least I sure would press that forward through the rest of the councilors to support that,
Okay.
to get you enough tickets, to do what we can, at least on our side of the table here, to help you in your efforts. So please, get me those numbers, and then we'll, hopefully with the rest of the council, find a way to get you those tickets.
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Councilor Jameson.
Councilor Brown.
Stacy, thanks for your report. One thing, when you were going through your statistics, it reminded me that a lot of the numbers mirror what we talked about in the housing study that Councilor Anderson led. I was part of that. Councilor Jameson and former Councilor Litz were involved with. Community development has that. I'm wondering if the HAB couldn't take a look at that, dust that off, and see if there are some answers in there that we could be using to help with that housing issue.
Those are the 3 categories that we've identified before. So we know people earning less than $20,000 a year, our minority population, and our elderly, I think it's our senior housing. So those gaps are still in play, and that's kind of where the Housing Trust Fund figures in, because it will address that $20,000 and below. We're looking at 30% of AMI and below, so about $20,000 a year annually that people would be earning. So I would love to.
I would encourage you to take a look at that again and see if there's anything that can be used going forward.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Bennigan.
I'm not sure, Stacy, if this is for you or for Jill, but in our notes, it talks about the safe home's going to be open in December. You've already selected 20 individuals to occupy that. It holds 33, so there's 13 vacancies, and it already shows 60 people on the waiting list. Why aren't those 13 filled?
Because that'd be a question because there's just the 2 staff right now still operating the program, and those spaces would need to be taken care of. The 20, and they've been working them up. They're about 26 now. Randy and Lori are the 2 caseworkers that that work with this population. They've been slowly moving forward, but in order to add anybody additional to the program before December, that would require paying for a motel or some sort of thing and the county has already been doing a wonderful job of providing for this program for the last 4 years, and then will continue to do so as it moves forward. But in order to make sure that we're making a proper transition, because it's a brand new building with 33 units, it's going to be a learning curve for everybody. We want to make sure that we're doing it in the best way possible. And with all the research that everybody's done, we know that you transition them in slowly. So the best way to do that would be to do a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time. The wait list is going to continue to be there. We knew this was an issue when we did that survey in 2006, and it said we had about 90 chronically homeless individuals in the city of Sioux Falls and about another 160 or so that could benefit from some supportive services that were also continuously homeless. So it's a big, daunting number, and this is just one little piece. And so I think, as with all things, it takes time and financial support.
If I may, so are the 60 people that are on the waiting list, have they been interviewed or have they not been interviewed?
I think they've been in, that's a question I don't know.
Good evening, Carol Muller from Minnehaha County. And yes, we're slowly increasing that number. For about the past 4 or 5 years, as Safe Home has started originally in a pilot process, it started with 20 people. And so this summer, our staff came to me and said, can we work it with budget, that we could slowly increase that number, so instead of going from 20 to 33, once the facility is done, that we can do more of a transition throughout there so that it's more successful. And I said, we'll make budget work. So for the commissioners, we are making budget work in order to do that. So I think they're pretty close up to 26 now is where they're at. And then our goal is to move in 1 a day. Does that answer?
Kind of.
I don't think that all 60 of them have been interviewed.
Okay.
Oh, yes, thank you. No, not all 60 have been interviewed. What our staff has gone to using is a vulnerability scale and looking at saying, you know, where on that list do they fall? It's also a population that moves around, transitory, thank you, that moves around a little bit. So sometimes, you know, there's a few on there we can't always find back.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Stacy, was there some more with the presentation?
Nope, that's it.
Okay.
I'm good.
Very good. County commissioners or city councilors, any further comments? Very good. Thank you. Very good. Item number 5.
2011 Youth Needs Assessment for Sioux Falls.
Good evening. I'm Nicole Berger of Volunteers of America Dakotas. And I want to follow up with Stacy and talk about the 2011 Youth Needs Assessment, which kind of correlates a little bit. You'll hear about the youth part of some of the homelessness issue and some of the gaps in services and all of that. And so what you have in front of you is basically the PowerPoint presentation, but basically this is the whole entire document. What I'm going to give you is pretty much an executive summary tonight and all of that, of just kind of what we did, why we did it, and all of that. And if you have questions, of course, at the end, thank you, Stacy, feel free to ask me that. The interesting thing is I'll be before you in 1 week to talk about how this relates directly with Pettigrew Heights. Some of this focus and this information was done directly in correlation with some of the youth in Pettigrew Heights. So there is a breakdown of some of the youth in the city of Sioux Falls and some of the youth that reside in the Pettigrew Heights neighborhood as a specific project that we did this last year. But there was 276 youth surveys that were conducted in the spring of 2011. Myself, Stacy Teason, Wendy Giebink, Steph Greb, and then we had an independent evaluator work on this project, Tasha Allman. And then we did this over a 1-week time period in a variety of different places throughout the city of Sioux Falls, besides Volunteers of America, the Juvenile Detention Center, parks, banquet, and just throughout the city, because we really wanted to catch kids and young adults wherever they were at. We also walked the entire neighborhood of Pettigrew Heights. And we went door to door and hung out at the corner. We didn't care. We really wanted to get a grasp of youth and meeting, like I said, meeting them where they were at. One of the interesting things is that we've done this survey before, but what we wanted to do this year, as opposed to years past, and because there was some state money tied to that, we wanted to get a perspective on some alcohol data, some drug abuse data, and so we had to ask some specific questions. One of the things of the 276 surveys that we did, we had 152 of them that were male, 114 that were female, and one youth that identified as transgender of those. Some areas of concern of the assessment and all of that, in which I did include in your packets a copy of what the assessment was, and it was a de-identification assessment. So even though, so there was no identification that went back to that. One of the things is the average age of first use of alcohol was 12.1. So most youth age were starting to drink at the age of 13 years old. They shared that they got the majority of their alcohol from friends their age, strangers, buying it themselves, and from stealing it. One of the things we'll talk about more specifically, though, next week is youth that come into the neighborhood of Pettigrew Heights to purchase alcohol. 97 of the 276 youth shared that they did not live with a parent or guardian. And almost 46% share that they've skipped a meal or went hungry. Either their food stamps ran out, they weren't able to make it down to the banquet because of transportation issue, sometimes once a day to weekly to just depending on what their housing or homeless situation was. And so that presented a variety of different challenges and situations. One of the with some of the data and some of that, we wanted to put too that 15.6% of the youth reported that they felt like they had a drinking or drug problem themselves, which is a pretty high percentage. One of the things we did with each and every youth that we met with is we gave them a youth survival guide. We met as a group and gave them a list of variety of resources. So whether that was housing, whether that was treatment, counseling, whatever that case may be, but it was a youth survival guide that each youth got. We also had incentives. You know, it wasn't a big incentives. Maybe it was, here's a free ice cream cone, or maybe it was a gift card to go get a burger, or any of that. But they had a choice whether or not they wanted to do the survey. They had a choice whether or not they wanted to skip a question or any of that. But it was interesting because besides doing the survey, some of them just wanted to do it by themselves. Some of them wanted us to read them the questions, but they each had a story. And so out of these 276 kids and young adults, they each had an individual story. And some of the stories were very trying and very telling, but 81% of these kids did not have a GED or high school diploma. Some of them didn't want to go to school, some of them were in school, and some of them struggled with going to school. And so part of it was really trying to figure out what were the barriers. Some of the kids identified their barriers as themselves. Some of them said, I don't have a job because I'm too lazy and I don't want to get a job. Some of them said, I don't have a job because I don't know how to fill out a resume. I don't know how to fill out an application. Or some of them stated, I'm not going to school right now because my parents aren't working and I need to help pay the bills. So this becomes the reality. We've been doing this survey now for 4 years, and the reality is these are our most vulnerable and at-risk kids at this point. When we look at needs and all of that, 22% said that they have a medical need of some sort. 20% said they had a dental need, and 15.6% reported they had a vision care need of some sort. 20% said they wanted to talk to someone about the problems they were having, and whatever a variety of problems that was. from exploitation, which we don't like to talk about very publicly a lot of times, being exploited, to just problems with a boyfriend or girlfriend, or just basic coping skills. We know that kids talk about their coping. We know that sometimes they talk about listening to music, to watching TV, to talking to friends, but we also know that a lot of our youth talked about alcohol and drug abuse and tobacco and also self-harm. And about a fifth of these kids self-reported that they had a mental health issue that they would self-diagnose or someone else had diagnosed themselves. A key difference for them that they said is that some of them struggled or needed medication themselves. We asked a lot of, like I said, open-ended questions and some of that. We wanted to make sure that they had a chance to have a positive outlet or a positive place to go. So like I said, we gave them that resource. We gave them that guide in order to do that. It's hard to generalize for each of them and saying the Pettigrew kids did this and the rest of the city did this, but there was some differences in regards to that. There is some parts in here that have some missing data because we had the kids be able to make a choice. But how did they get through an average day? And like I said, some of it depend on what their family support system is. And we let kids, so we ask kids, how would you define your family? And some kids would define their family as a friend, or someone from the Bowdoin Youth Center, or someone from the school. They wouldn't define what we would maybe define as our mother or our father. A lot of these kids couldn't identify as that because their parents maybe weren't the kind of parents that each of us would have. A couple things that I do want to highlight. I know that we're on time, but on page 13, the housing and basic needs, when we ask about in the last year, because there was no other safe place to stay, did you spend at least one night somewhere other than home? And we had at least 10 of our youth identified that they stayed outdoors, which is pretty significant. If we look at what we just found out with the adult population, this is with our youth population. And that is pretty significant. We had 17 identified that they were living with either themselves or an adult or a family member in a hotel or motel. So quite significant. In the last 30 days then of when we did this survey, 2 had been outdoors. We did this survey at the end of March, beginning of April. So we know it was very significant and very cold. I'm very pleased to say that those kids that we worked with and ran into at that time, we did get services. So by doing that and meeting kids where they're at, we were able to get them services, but it's very scary. We had 3 kids identified that they'd been in an abandoned building. So that's somewhere in the city, that's somewhere in the county here in Sioux Falls. On page 16, when it goes to missing a meal and going hungry, as we talked about, and other programs they needed, kids responded that they've missed a meal or they needed everything. We had young people who didn't have any socks or didn't have any underwear. And because maybe their parents had a drinking or drug issue or even a gambling problem, that money maybe that would have been spent on basic needs, that they didn't have those basic items. So each night they were washing out their 1 pair of underwear each night in order to have a, kind of quote unquote a fresh pair to wear the next day at school. And so how do we address that? What do we do? I really believe in meeting with the youth and getting their ideas and getting their feedback, because we can't build the program unless they tell us. We asked about, do you have a job or need help finding a job? And I reported that. So assistance of needs, and that's where we go to page 29. What do you want help with? Well, we've talked about transportation. Over a fifth of them said they need help with transportation. We've talked about this. Our youth talk about if they get a job and it's at the mall and they live downtown, how are they going to get home from their job? If it's 20 below, how are they going to get home from their job? Or do we expect them to walk that late at night? Help getting an apartment. Over a fifth need help getting an apartment. As Stacy reported, we have over 10 people that are living in a 2-bedroom apartment. It's not safe. Plus, sometimes they're missing a meal or any of that. Sometimes they need help with budgeting. Getting medical care and dental care. Sometimes they didn't understand what the CHIPS program is, or they thought that they would be off Medicaid. If we look at kind of that disadvantaged population, that 18 to 24-year-old, help getting medications and all of that is about 20 of our youth, and that's really that young adult population. And I think that's really important to look at. Most of them, at least a fifth of them, said, when we talked about, do you want help or do you want to talk to someone about your problems? Most of them, at least a fifth, said yes. Now, some of them talked about sometimes they want it to be an adult, sometimes they want it to be someone their own age. It just kind of depends, and they said it also depended on how their day was and what was going on or what the issue or situation was. So one of the things what we talked about is a lot of them are disconnected from their family. And so they've made a new resolution of who their family is or what they've stated as who their family is. But what we wanted to do was give you a snapshot of what the youth are stating are their issues. The adults have got to say their point, but this is what the youth are saying. We know that the youth are struggling with homelessness, at being risk of being homeless. They're struggling with drug and alcohol abuse, getting their basic needs met. And so making sure that they have a voice in all of that, and especially then their struggle and how do they access both of their positive, what are their positive outlets, but also what are their negative outlets, what are some of the poor choices they do, and where do they access that, and how can we be an influence, what are some positive things we can do in the community, and what are some of those gaps that we can do. So we wanted to make sure that you had this data as we worked really hard as a collaborative effort in order to put this assessment together. We had an independent evaluator. We didn't even get to look at the surveys this year in order to put this together. And we really wanted that, like I said, to have the youth have their voice. We brought the youth together and said, what would you be your recommendations? So I met with them about 4 weeks ago, and I said, and kind of went through some of this data, and they said, we want help with getting our basic needs being met. That's what our biggest struggle is, from transportation to clothing to food to all that. The second thing is we would like some help with employment and job skills and all of that. And the third thing is just to make sure that, having an adult and having somebody there just to be there and listen to. And there are outlets like that. But sometimes, at 2 o'clock in the morning, are they apt to call some of us adults? And are we apt to pick up at 2 o'clock in the morning? We probably think they've been out drinking and we may not answer the phone at 2 a.m. We'd like them to call before they make maybe those poor choices and some of that. So right now we're working on some proposals and resolutions with the youth to take some of the recommendations that they've had, take some of this data, make some of those recommendations and develop a program for those youth that they want. And that's kind of our next step. But we wanted to make sure that you had the data of the most that we would put the most at risk of our city. And I'll entertain any questions at this point.
And Nicole, I apologize. We are going to have to end this particular meeting. My recommendation would be that you are making a presentation again.
With Pettigrew Heights.
With Pettigrew Heights, to both bodies?
No.
To which body? To the City Council? Okay, very good. Nicole, at that time, certainly broaden your presentation again to the City Council. And in terms of the county commissioners, I don't have an immediate recommendation, but I will pass that over to Commissioner Benega. Any recommendations in terms of how we can take a very important topic with very, very important information and actually do it in a way where you're not so rushed? Any thoughts?
My first thought would be is if we could attend the Pettigrew Heights meeting, that would be awesome. And we could do it together. If not, we would have to reschedule something for a later date.
That works for me, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor.
What we can do is we'll certainly let you folks know about that meeting. We'll certainly invite you to that as well. It'll give you an opportunity, Nicole, to maybe slow down just a little bit, and so we can be educated as much as we possibly can. Again, thank you for your efforts. Truly appreciate it. Councilor Urbanbach, did you have any final comment?
I really just wanted to thank Nicole for coming and starting us on this path of understanding some of the statistics that are going on. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, and you did a great job. I just apologize. We just didn't allow enough time. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Commissioner Barth has made a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Council?
Motion to adjourn on city side.
Second, Brown.
Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmembers Aguilar,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Intiman,
Yes.
Erfenbach,
Yes.
Jamison,
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Ralph.
Yes. That is passed 8-0. County Commission, City Council, Minnehaha County, and City of Sioux Falls, thank you very much for your patience and for your attention. This meeting is adjourned.